Welcome to Rainmakers, where we talk with people who are making success, creating success for so many people around the world. And you know what? Sometimes you find out that some of the most successful people, some of the ones who are creating the world's successes, are right here in our backyard, and that's what we found today. Fred Barrett, Pacific Northwest Salmon Center.
Good morning.
You know, Fred, the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center, you know, to me, since I live in the Northwest, I think that that's just something for me, but actually it's not, is it?
It really isn't. You know, our name is Pacific Northwest Salmon Center, and from there, really, the impacts that we have are not only felt in Washington and on the Olympic Peninsula where we're located, but they're felt throughout the Pacific Northwest and throughout the world. We're doing some things here that involve science that's going to be applicable in all sorts of places throughout the globe.
And that's why actually we have chosen to bring Fred and the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center onto Rainmakers because of all of the tremendous impacts that it can have. So I want you to go to the website if you can to, I believe it's Pacific Salmon, what is it?
PNWSalmonCenter.org.
PNWSalmonCenter.org. So we're going to give that many, many times throughout the show. The Salmon Center itself, tell me about the germination of this idea. How did it happen?
Sure. So back in the early 90s in Washington State, salmon are certainly an icon for the Pacific Northwest in general, but we had some troubles with salmon. We were not getting the runs returning the way that we needed to. In fact, in the Hood Canal, we'd pretty much all but lost the summer chum runs.
And why was that?
Just, you know, a whole bunch of environmental issues, a whole bunch of things. In fact, one of the big issues was we didn't know. And so a group, in fact, in Washington State, 14 regional fishery enhancement groups were legislated into existence back then to address the problem, and they basically are addressing it on a watershed by watershed basis. Our group was the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group, and we were obviously dealing with the Hood Canal area in the Olympic Peninsula. Not too long into that, in fact, if you roll back 20 years, you were remembering that we were digging up streets and digging up streams to put in bigger drain culverts, and there was a whole bunch of issues surrounding salmon there, and people were kind of feeling like they were being put upon by all this salmon talk that was going on, and it was very clear early on that if we weren't educating people as to why some of these steps were necessary, that we were not going to be, the work that we were doing was just going to be wasted.
Fred, this sounds really similar to some of the discussions I've had with others that is going on in developing countries where they are just now starting to develop, but there are other people who are saying you have to be environmentally conscious, ecologically conscious, and so forth from there. And it sounds like that's exactly where you are.
It's a really tough balancing act. You can look up and down the eastern seaboard, and in America we kind of took care of the Atlantic salmon by a lot of the work that we did on streams. We kind of dammed them up. Those salmon runs don't return. In the Pacific Northwest, salmon are so terribly important to us. I mean, if you look at our economy alone, it's in the neighborhood of a $4 billion economy with thousands and thousands of jobs that rely on it.
Let's go to some graphics, if we will. One of the things is about some of your partners, and the Native American Indians, tribal partners definitely are some of them as well, and very important. Let's go to that graphic, because if we go to the quote, the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center is so much more than an educational opportunity, because he talks about lots of things. Let's pull this up with the next one. Okay, educational opportunity. So very generally, how is it an educational opportunity, what you're doing at the Salmon Center?
It starts, actually, I've got a great example. So every year in the fall, the summer chum return to Hood Canal, and our biologists are out there, and we're collecting fish samples. We are counting and tagging. And that's a very public process. People stop by the streams and watch what we're doing, and they can interact with the biologists that are in the streams. I had a little 10-year-old girl came by, and her mom and dad brought her over to see what was going on with the fish. And one of our biologists, Mindy Harlow, very engaging in terms of what was going on, and it was very cute the way she was talking to the girl. About 5 minutes after that whole process started, a couple of teenage boys show up, and you know how teenage boys can be, right?
Yes.
And one of the kids gets out of the car, and he makes a statement: "Is this where we're killing the salmon?" And this little girl spun on her heels and took that teenager to task, and had nailed all the conversations she'd had with Mindy about how fish come back every 4 years and how they're here to spawn, and was just going through that. Now imagine the difference in impact between what that 10-year-old's going to bring to the world 20 years from now when she's a grown adult, and the opportunity that may or may not have been missed for that teenage boy. We can argue about whether they'll ever learn anything, but it goes from there. It goes to all sorts of biology stuff. Our particular property, we're doing a lot of data telemetry, sensors in the stream.
We're going to get more specific on education a little bit later on the show, but I wanted to go on high-level stuff on the next. Let's go to the next click in this quote, again coming from Mike Pavel.
Michael Pavel.
And then the next one after the educational opportunity is important research.
Yes.
So it's a scientific center as well.
Absolutely. In
How
fact,
so?
the Washington State University and University of Washington are both running research studies out of there. One of the big ones is the Hood Canal dissolved oxygen issue.
Dissolved oxygen.
Dissolved oxygen.
Okay,
You have
that's a long word.
It's a long word, but the net of it is when you develop around a body of water, you're going to clear out the native trees. All right, well, it turns out in Washington, you clear out the evergreens, and one of the things that's first to grow back is alder. Well, alder has more nitrogen in it, which the fish don't like, and it turns out it's enough to be a tipping point in Hood Canal. And one of the things we were trying to understand is how come we were losing fish. Salmon, we have these big fish kills, thousands of fish showing up on the shore dead, and how did that happen? Well, thanks to Congressman Norm Dix and a lot of effort, we've been studying that, and the university students and the graduates are coming, and they're really staging out of Pacific Northwest Salmon Center and doing that and amazing research right out of our facility.
So it sounds again like the problem that you are coming up with solutions for may be applicable in the Amazon, where they're working so hard on reforestation.
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, what starts in Hood Canal happens in Puget Sound. You'll see the Puget Sound Partnership actually. We were very influential in some of the early stages of that, and then you take it to any body of water, especially any body of water that is an incubator for fish, and you're going to be able to take this information and really replicate it.
Okay, let's go to the next click in this, again from Mike Pavel.
Michael Pavel is
Michael
the
Pavel.
spiritual leader for the Skokomish tribe.
Oh, environmental stewardship. You talked a little bit about that probably with the 10-year-old, but she may have given the lesson to the teenagers, huh?
She gave the lesson to the teenager, and you know, it wasn't 15 minutes after that exchange that we were walking further downstream, and it was a summer afternoon, and we were at Belfair State Park. A mom has her two 13-year-old boys walking up the stream. Now, for her, it was a warm day, so she was being refreshed. She had her Crocs on, and she was walking right up the middle of the stream, completely oblivious to the fact that the salmon that were swimming around her were coming up to spawn, and what she was actually doing was killing all of those salmon that had spawned there before, wiping out the eggs by simply walking up. And her kids were throwing rocks at the salmon that were coming up the stream. So it was such a stark moment to realize we have a lot of work to do to educate the people on what kind of impact their actions can have if they're not thinking about the environment.
Again, going to a complete other continent, what's happening on the Nigerian Delta right now, it sounds like lessons that you have learned. It's not necessarily about salmon, but it is about the impact of the oil industry, not only on the economy there, but
Right.
also on the environment. So.
Yeah, you know, we're going to be exporting all sorts of things involving environmental sciences. I mean, certainly recycling it's something that we do in the U.S. It's not something everybody does. Not to say that the U.S. is ahead of the game in all various aspects. We've got our work to do as well. But it's these kind of educational moments that we can export, and it's only going to make things better.
Okay, now let's go to the next click on this, because again, Michael Pavel from the Skokomish tribe, anyway, talks about leadership with community, industry, the ecosystem, and the nation as a whole. Is there, are you guys leaders coming out of here? It sounds like you are.
You know, we took some very bold steps early on, and it wasn't necessarily something that everybody agreed with. We took a piece of property, 90-acre piece of property that was put into farming in the late 1800s, and basically the Army Corps of Engineers came in and diked up this big chunk of estuary and turned it into a farm. Well, you can imagine what would happen is that here we are in 2000, and we're going to take that farm away, and we're going to remove some of those dikes. Well, that's 23% of the original Union River estuary. Estuaries have been proven that they are basically the incubators for salmon. The baby fish need a place to hang between when they're born and when they're heading out into the big world, right? And so we took a leadership position, and we reacquired that property, and it hasn't always been easy.
So you've shown your leadership, you've shown high level on education, the environment, and ecology. Let's actually drill down just a little bit into the ecology aspect of what you're doing at the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center. Let's actually go to the clip of the estuary and maybe salmon and the ecosystem. A little bit later on, we're going to get to this great picture of a salmon and a bear, and you know, I look at that and I'm thinking I'm in Alaska, but actually that's in lots of places.
You know, and it's right, not only is it right up the street from us at the Salmon Center, we're part of the Union River that comes out and then heads into the Hood Canal, where Hood Canal begins, right there at the Salmon Center.
So is this that Elton John Circle of Life
Oh
thing?
yeah, absolutely, and absolutely. And the amazing thing is that the salmon come back upstream after their 4 years in the world. They lay their eggs, and then their carcasses rot, which are fed on by the bugs. And the bugs are there when the baby salmon are born to eat. So the babies are eating the bugs that were eating the carcasses, and the bears and various other animals and the eagles are coming by and eating also on the carcasses. When you take a salmon carcass, in fact, part of our efforts are actually bringing carcasses back where salmon have no longer returned to spawn, because part of it is building up the enrichment of that food base, and so that the rest of the ecosystem is there to support salmon when they do return.
Are you an environmental scientist? I'm
not, and actually I'm like the least environmental guy involved, and I am living proof you can be converted. My involvement in the Salmon Center really early on was surrounding education. For me, you have an opportunity to take a fourth grader and put them through a program that has them entering college with all this experience. Go to the science, technology, engineering, math, that STEM, the STEM concept.
Yep, we're definitely going to be
We're going to get into that. But yes, you can be taught.
Let's go to the environment clip too, because when you go to the environment clip, there's something that in preparing for the show that I wanted to make sure that I understood was the farm at water's edge. Now, I grew up in the South. There were farms, the southern part of the United States. There were farms all over the place. They're not exactly the most environmentally conscious groups.
Absolutely, they're not.
So how can you turn a farm and make it environmentally conscious?
And that's an amazing thing. Is first off, you have to I have this saying that annoys a lot of people, but you can't rise above the noise unless you're in it to begin with. How are we going to know what the issues are unless you're living it? And then once you get into the noise, so to speak, learn and make changes and grow. From a farm perspective, we have our own gardens. In fact, when we took over this property, there was a lawn service that would show up every week, and they'd mow the lawn and they'd put down fertilizer, not realizing, of course, that fertilizer was going to walk 30 feet into the stream and cause all sorts of, be a contributor to the nitrogen issues. So you have to take that and say, look, Mr. Landscape guys, can we talk about a different way of doing that? The farm at Water's Edge is the name that we put on the property. We actually have alpacas, we have goats, we have chickens, and it's all about how do you orchestrate this farm so that it does have a zero carbon impact and also takes good care of the stream. It can be done with the right crops, the right animals and all that.
I want to talk about this green farm and in fact your green area in just a minute, but right now we're going to take a very short break. We're talking with a Rainmaker today. The Rainmaker's name is Fred Barrett. He is one of the founders of the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center, and he is the quintessential example of someone who acts locally but thinks globally. And so we strongly encourage you to go to pnwsalmoncenter.org to learn more about a success that is local, that has global implications. Okay, Fred, we're talking about the greenness, the ecological and environmentally responsible aspect of this farm and this entire area. Tell us about that and why is that even important?
You know, everything's important. And one of the interesting things about that I've learned here, certainly in the last couple of years, this nitrogen issue I think I talked about earlier in Hood Canal. Hood Canal seems like it would take care of itself as long as we didn't get in there and pollute it, right? And you don't even know what pollution really is. You assume it's oil, but I talked about earlier being something as simple as alder trees.
Yeah.
It turns out Hood Canal, one of the things they've learned is 95% of the problem with nitrogen in the water is something that occurs naturally. It's that extra 2% that man is adding to the picture that's causing this tipping point. All right?
Like the fertilizer.
Like the fertilizer. So it is, you think about it not being that big of a deal, but it could be that. I hate to use the word the straw that broke the camel's back, but there's a reason those sayings came about, right?
Well, that actually could kill a species.
That actually can wipe out a species.
Wow. And at the Salmon Center, you're taking it to a different level. You're looking at everything that you do. Is that the way it is?
Absolutely, from top to bottom. You know, and I, if you don't mind, I wasn't one of the original founders. I did come in later on in the process.
Oops,
I wanted to clarify that. That's okay. But it's the people that were founding it and the people that are there every day look at virtually every aspect of what we do, from recycling to how do we handle our wastewater? How is our electricity generated? How can we create a zero carbon footprint? One of the nice things is this facility allows you to come down and look at it and interact with it, because one of the things that I've learned in the last 5 years is that we talk a lot about environmental stewardship. We talk, but how do you see it? How you know, besides putting my recycling out on Wednesday mornings for the garbage man to pick up, what does it be an environmental stewardship? What does that really mean? We try to provide interactive examples of that so you can come down and understand why you plant this crop next to that crop, because this crop will eat the nitrogen from that crop. Why do we put our streams this way? Why is that whole thing about a 50-foot buffer back from a salmon stream, which really gets property owners up in arms?
So, right, what you just said, though, is why I'm called you a rainmaker. I mean, you're a global rainmaker because of the leadership that you're providing. We got to go to education. Let's go to the education clip, because you've talked about education a little bit. You talked about the brief example that you gave with the 10-year-old, and that very quick. But you also talked about science, technology, engineering, and math. How possibly could a Salmon Center have anything to do with STEM?
You know, when you look at, there's all sorts of things that go on to cause research to happen. Start with sensors that are monitoring things like temperature and oxygen. Those sensors need to talk back to some place for the data to be collected. You're looking at electronics, you're looking at radios, you're looking at data telemetry. That information is collected. You're looking at information technology systems. It has to be analyzed. Somebody has to decide whether that number is better than that number, all right? And you have to have a basis for that. One of the things that we're seeing is that the kids that are coming out of the Salmon Center programs, and those run by Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group, they're going into college with a head start in how science is done. How is biology done? And it isn't just how do I handle a beaker and a test tube. They actually have done the field work and the research and are miles ahead of those students who haven't been part of it. So kind of a goal here is that you come out of elementary school, you've got a fast track through high school, and you've already got a seat waiting for you at a four-year college and a marine biology degree or some sort of environmental degree or just a science degree is waiting for you.
Wow, so it's sort of like by osmosis, you're getting your science, your technology, engineering, and math.
And there you go. Osmosis is a scientific function.
All right, around the world, probably the number one problem that we have seen is poverty. So whenever there is an economic ability to do anything, then that seems to be first.
Absolutely.
Well, here you are, an environmentally conscious, ecologically conscious, educationally conscious, and there's something good in the economy tied to this Pacific Northwest Salmon Center?
You know, I mentioned earlier, $4 billion worth of economies surround salmon. And, you know, as humans, we can tend to be short-sighted. We heard the arguments in the stock market, you know, Americans don't invest for the long term, we're investing in the short term. And the truth is if you wipe out a salmon run, you're going to wipe out your ability to survive. And that's not sustainable. Okay, and so yeah, it may be that in a short period of time, different steps have to be taken. But if you take away your ability to eat, if you take away the ecosystem that supports the life that you need to again to feed yourself and your families, at some point down the road, you're looking at barren wasteland, and it's time to have to move on to some other place.
Well, let's get specific about the economic impact. If we could get that slide up there, because we actually have some of the numbers that you have. The first number is sport fishing, 15,000 jobs, wildlife viewing, 26,000 jobs, commercial harvest, 14,000 jobs. But you add all that together, you got 55,000 jobs in the economic impact of $4 billion. That's just here annually here in the United States, and here basically in this local area. Do you think that other cultures, let's say other developing countries, could take an area like the Nigerian Delta, and I'm not asking you to get specific about that, but they could take the problem that they have there and use the land better using some of the principles that you've talked about?
You know, I think that all of this stuff that we learn, it is exportable. If you look at what we're experiencing here in Puget Sound from Puget Sound Health, they've already had this issue back in on the Chesapeake Bay on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that if you allow a certain set of conditions to occur, it doesn't matter if they occur in Seattle or in Burien or in San Francisco, you're going to have basically the same set of outcomes. What can we learn here? How can we export that information to other countries and help them prevent making our same mistakes? I mean, you know, we don't want to be the ones out there telling other countries how to run their world, but one of the things you can say is, look, we dammed up our streams, we lost our salmon. The least we can do is tell you, don't do it the way that we did it. You know, I mean, that's an educational process, right?
Something else again, in preparing for the show and looking at pictures, I was thinking, man, this place is beautiful. And you actually have some enjoyment. Let's go ahead and get that next clip up, because just a little bit of walking around out there seems like it's a dream.
It's an absolutely gorgeous piece of property. I mean, look at the Pacific Northwest. You know, I did a project down in Dallas, and you know, not to diss on Dallas, but it's kind of flat and it's kind of brown, and look at what we have up here for just a gorgeous area. Well, you know, that gorgeous area is really dependent on the salmon and their ecosystem. The bears aren't going to hang around if they've got nothing to eat. The eagles aren't going to hang around if they've got nothing to eat. The fish really are kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes time. If the fish can't live here, at some point we're not going to be able to either.
Got to ask you this, Fred. It's kind of like an overarching question. Why are you doing this?
You know, like I said, the passion in this project had to do with education. I've had an opportunity to travel around the U.S. and internationally a lot. And to me, when you look at a community like Olympic Peninsula and specifically North Mason County where we're located, you know, the kids that we're bringing up need every opportunity to be successful in the world. And one of the things that we've been kind of light on is mathematics, the science. We need to be able to generate the next crop of people that's going to take care of this planet for us. And that comes with a whole bunch of education and not TV, not video games. You need to be out in the field. And that's the amazing thing. You watch these fourth graders come back from the field after having done their first biology experiment. Their eyes are lit up and they're ready for more.
And you're not alone in your work.
I am, like I said, I'm the least environmental of all of them, and we've got a great crew. There's about 15 or 16 folks in both the actual sciences as well as administration down there. We have over 2,000 volunteers that are involved in this program every year.
So what are the kinds of people who are donating, who are volunteering their time and their money, their time and treasure?
It's all over the board. We have certainly a lot of educators are involved. We have, of course, the sport fishing communities there. And you know, one of the things, to give them credit, they're the first ones to know that if they don't put salmon back, there will be nothing to catch next year. And gentleman by the name of Bill Portuguese and one of the founders, Al Adams, very much involved in that. In fact, they're raising salmon in their own on their own property on Hood Canal. The business community is involved at all levels. So it's really, I mean, you pick a particular industry or pick a personality, and they're all involved with us.
Well, something like that was striking to me in the frequently asked questions was why would you donate? Why would you give your time and talents and money to an organization like this rather than help the homeless? And it seems like you're kind of catching all of these issues all kind of in one thing.
Good example, working with the salmon hatcheries. All right, every year in our hatcheries there are fish carcasses that go unused. We've got the eggs out of those that we can, and what's left over actually is food that's being donated, salmon steaks being donated to food banks.
Really?
And so, you know, it is an ecosystem that is intertwined, and I couldn't have told you all this 5 years ago.
Now, there are people in government, because you have to have people in government, I suspect.
You know, we really do, and all of, you know, the Norm Dix, huge supporter, Congressman Norm Dix, Fred Finn, Kathy Haig at the local level, all manner of Washington legislators are really very supportive of us.
Even the Washington governor?
Absolutely. In fact, every year we do a Wild Salmon Hall of Fame where we honor those people that are really involved in salmon and wild salmon restoration. And I believe Governor Gregoire a couple of years ago gave us a nice speech by way of satellite.
We have only a minute and a half left. As you experience this beautiful area and help preserve it for the future, for generations to come, what's the thing that has impressed you the most, has impacted you the most? What was that aha moment that said, yeah, I'm doing the right thing?
There are so many on a regular basis, I'm going to tell you. But I think for me was watching the kids watching them come out of the field and realizing that if we don't empower them with information of how to take care of this world, that we're not really setting them up for their success. And that really goes, I mean, it goes around the world, because a kid that starts today in Belfair is probably going to wind up in another state, maybe winds up in another country. And those influences that we have now are going to be what helps us as a species propagate. The earth will be here, but will we have taken care of our house?
Or will we have destroyed it?
Or will we have destroyed it?
Well, Fred, thank you very much for being with us. And like I said before, sometimes, even though here at Rainmakers we go around the world looking for successes, sometimes the success that we find are right here in our backyard. And we'll see you next time right here on Rainmakers TV. By the way, I want you to go to pnwsalmoncenter.org, and you're going to learn an awful lot more. Take care.